It is being recorded. And for the recording,
Here we go.
once again state who is in the room. Myself, Chair of the Board of Selectmen, Christine Hoyt, Member John Duvall. We are the two members of the Budget Subcommittee for the Board of Selectmen. Finance Director, soon to be full-time, Crystal Wojcik. For the Town of Adams, Town Administrator Jay Green. Sitting to my left is Chair of the Hoosick Valley Regional School District, Mike Mucci. Also for the school district, Aaron Dean, Superintendent, Business Manager Erica Snyder, and Chair of the Finance Committee, Tim Burdick. I think that I have everybody in the room. As this is a subcommittee, there will be no votes taken, so there is no need for any roll call votes. If the need should arise for some unbeknownst reason, I can't imagine, it would be a roll call vote. That is all of my housekeeping. I think that I'm set with that. Okay, and attending remotely, Jay, can you read the list of who's on the call?
We have Miss Ashley Satko, who's taking minutes tonight on behalf of the Accounting Department and the Office of the Board of Selectmen. We have a Miss Catherine Foster logged in. We have our friend Jack Carino from My Berkshires, and we have somebody identifying himself as Teresa's iPad.
So if Teresa's iPad could give us a first and last name, as we will need it for the attendance record, that would be appreciated.
You bet. This is Teresa Dano, 1 Ashford Heights, Adams, Massachusetts.
All right. Thank you, Terry.
Yep.
All right. So the only business to come before this budget subcommittee is to talk about kind of where we are with the preliminary budget that's been drafted for fiscal 22, and then to have a conversation about the school district budget, which is still preliminary at this point. So Jay, I'll turn things over to you.
Sure. So this begins our annual trek into the fiscal 22 budget. We are on a good path, a good course right now, where we actually have our budget from the governor, as known as budget H1, governor's H1. So the first step every year with the municipal budgeting process is the governor submits the cherry sheet. So these are our famous cherry sheets. This gives us our local aid number. This gives us also the money that the state takes back. This gives us our chapter 70. Mary Beverly, come on in.
No mask. I'll try to stand in the middle. There's your original and your copy.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
There are 3 copies. If anybody
Great.
wants some nighttime reading.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
Okay.
Sure.
Did you need?
Can I get one?
Yeah.
Could use it.
So, and then I'm
You
gonna
guys, yeah,
send them down.
right?
Yeah.
You don't need to print out of what you,
One of them is Erica's, which I did take before the start of the meeting. So it is 4 pages.
See, Crystal, it's not much different than, classroom. Here, take one, pass it around.
No,
I meant to bring extras.
that's okay. We have copiers. Okay, sorry, Jake, continue.
so,
So we
But
kind of,
Erica needs them.
do they? I'm sorry. Eric.
Yeah, that's okay. Let's try to make it right there. Thanks.
I still need a copy.
Oh.
You just need to be on camera, is what it is.
That's what you're making me do. I got it.
Yeah.
I can only have it.
Okay.
So we look at the municipal budget process as a building block budget. And it's good for everyone to know really what we talk about are estimated numbers. Crystal and I were talking about this earlier today. These local aid numbers that we get, the chapter 70 numbers that we get, anyone who's around municipal finance for a while understands that these numbers can change. But what we like to do is we like to try to input as myself and the town accountant sit down and assemble all of these numbers as they come along. So as our insurance number comes in or as our fixed costs come in, we begin to input those into the budget. We already decided this year, as the town of Adams has in the past, we have to go with a level funded operating budget. And then we look at that, our personnel costs, et cetera, that have to go up, fixed costs that have to go up, and we plug all those in. So one of the big numbers, or I should say probably 2 numbers, that we as a community look at, as everybody knows early on, is what is the school department, excuse me, the 2 school district assessments will be. those are important to have those conversations early. So I think compared to, maybe it's just because we're comparing it to last year, which was a complete anomaly within the unorthodox process. I feel this year is really good. Both McCann and Hoosick Valley have reached out. They've provided us their preliminary numbers. Hoosick Valley, always being the larger number, being a larger district, always has a little bit more analysis to do with it. But we do have, I want to say a good 75% of the municipal side, if not 80% or not higher, around there done. So we understand impact a little bit more. So this is good timing to be able to sit down, accept those numbers. Once we're able to sit down further with the budget subcommittee again, then we'll start our process with select board, finance committee, and we go. But I think this year, again, last year we took a couple of, curveballs. This year, this is the process that we like to have. We like to have a, discussion with all the key players, so everyone's on the same page. So that's kind of setting the stage for folks. And with that, I'll turn it over to, does anyone have any questions about the process, I should say, before I turn it over to the Hoosick Valley team?
I just want to state again, this is extremely preliminary. All of the information that we're talking about tonight, even the numbers that, the town is starting to put together with regard to the budget. It's so preliminary. And I know that the district is here to talk about a couple of different scenarios. You have your public hearing scheduled for March 8th. So you are not, wedded to the numbers and the scenarios that you're presenting, but it was warranting a conversation up front to just start looking at some numbers. So I can't stress that enough for everybody who's in the room and who's on this call, that this is all really just the start. There's still much more to the process going forward. Sorry.
No, it's very true, but it's the normal process. So, budget season's usually a good 90-day, 120-day season, I would say, running up to the World Series, which is usually town meeting. So, we start early. This is kind of our spring training, I guess you could say. Erica and Aaron, I think also just for folks at home, and it's always a good primer every year too, and with Crystal too. Can you just go through, because we would jump into almost immediately what the ask is for the year. Can you just go into how Hoosick Valley builds the budget? What numbers do you have a process that starts even earlier than we do in terms of weighting numbers from DESI, your own Chapter 70 number, et cetera. Can you go into what builds that ask we're going to come down to tonight?
Certainly. Well, similar to you, we get the H1 budget. We put those numbers together and see what we've got. I think a little bit in terms of differences for us, our district relies on aid and the towns to appropriate the revenue. The town has the tax base obviously to look at to appropriate the revenue. So we have to find a number that works for the communities and satisfies the needs. So, it's a balancing act how that goes. In terms of building our budget, we start in December doing a zero-based budget. So each building principal gets their spreadsheet from the year before and builds their budget from scratch, looking at, personnel at all levels, supplies, what was spent, what there might be in terms of needs, and they present to Erica and myself. We start assembling needs, things like class sizes, special education needs, all of those pieces, and really looking at building a budget based on those needs. And then once we come to a number, and we get the H1 number, we compare and slice and dice in a lot of cases, unfortunately, to get to where we need to be. This year, the complex part of all of it is there's also grant funds that are part of it, which is a great thing. But the grant funds had to fill in a lot of our needs with the pandemic, PPE, and additional staff for certain areas. We've had hybrid models and some different pieces. But moving forward, we also have grant funds to help us moving down the road, and things like technology we purchased this year, we're going to have to continue to update, purchase software and things like that. Obviously, there's maintenance needs, facilities needs that we started this year that are going to continue into next year. So it's really pulling all of those pieces together and looking at, you know, where we're at, and comparing those numbers. The numbers we got this year, I mean, we're one of those districts that falls in the cracks when we talk about state aid. We're big enough that we have needs, but we're small in the sense that we don't necessarily get the resources that you're hearing about across the state. So the Student Opportunity Act money, for example, you're hearing that millions and millions and millions of dollars are going across the state. Well, our grand total of money from that is about $30,000 to $40,000. We're a district that's been in hold harmless because of our size and enrollment. So we haven't really benefited from that piece. Some of the reworking around the numbers too, which I'll have Eric get into in a few minutes, is, you know, the minimum local contributions went down for the communities. As a regional district, we also deal with shifts in students' population. Adams being the larger town, when we have a shift that puts more students in Adams than Cheshire, and we have that shift in percentage, that essentially means that Adams is already going to increase to probably about what they budgeted for without any increase to our budget. So we're in a situation right now where we're essentially level funded with our budget, and we've had to put together some scenarios. We're utilizing grant funds to maintain some things and create a bridge. And, you know, this year is going to be kind of a bridge year to some consolidation that we can do in coming years. So we've had to build a few different scenarios. One is the ideal scenario that we know is likely not affordable. Another is a scenario kind of in between, where we utilize grant funds for some key positions and look at ways we can make the changes we need longer term. And then there's a scenario where we're using grant funds, but we still have to eliminate $115,000 from what I would call our core operating budget. So it's kind of a core plus more model that we're building at this point. So I don't know which, you want to go through numbers or?
The only thing, you know, in terms of kind of a budget 101 refresher is the way that we develop the town assessment in terms of taking our foundation budget and removing the Chapter 70 aid, the charter school aid, transportation aid, you know, things like that will give us our foundation budget. And once we have the foundation amount to be assessed to the towns, we're given a minimum local contribution, which is determined by the state, not by us, not by our, you know, regional agreement. And when that number shifts, and in this case decreased, more of our foundation gets pushed into over minimum, which is then distributed based on student enrollment. And where last year, the changes were an increase to Cheshire and a decrease to Adams enrollment, this year you're seeing a shift in the opposite direction. We have an increased number of Adams students and a decreased number of Cheshire students. And you're using that percentage now on a larger number because of the reduction in minimum local at the state level to the towns. So the illustration I have on the sheet with the red is basically showing you that even if we kept the exact same budget as last year, but substituted in the minimum local and the percentage of enrollment for this year, which we're going to use for this budget, the town of Adams assessment has already increased by $40,000 before we've even thought about increasing our own budget. And that's just the mechanics of the regional agreement based on enrollment for the over minimum and the shift of minimum local that the state has assigned to each town. So that was kind of, you know, eye-opening in the fact that we haven't done anything yet, and just based on these, you know, changes in enrollment and shifts at the state level, you're realizing an increase before we've been able to do anything. So it just shows how problematic our equation and formula can be to a regional district like us who relies so heavily on Chapter 70. When your Chapter 70 is only increasing by about $35,000, you don't have a lot to work with, and the balance then goes on accounts. So that was kind of the setup for this particular worksheet. Not sure if there's any questions on the mechanics of that, but that was just an illustration that I wanted to put out there. Just because if this continues to happen and the numbers go in the direction they're going, you know, it's only going to get larger over time. So that's kind of where we're looking at as a starting point. And then the other sheet which we presented were the scenarios we were looking at that Aaron had mentioned, just showing how our percentage increase, what our percentage increase to our budget translates to the town's assessment increase. And it's just something that has, you know, it'll continue to snowball as the years go by, and it's largely due to, like Aaron said, the category we fall in of not really reaping any benefit of any Student Opportunity Act or increases to Chapter 70 due to our declining population and decreasing enrollment.
So I just want to throw, I pulled the Chapter 70 cherry sheet for fiscal 22. And just so that everyone knows, the maximum total amount of receipts going to the district from the state in the governor's H1 proposal is $11,130,261. They take back $1,886,28, leaving $9,249,633 going to the district, with a proposed budget of anywhere from $20,228,000 to $20,503,000. So that just goes to show you what amount of money goes into the school district budget when we talk about, you know, Chapter 70 cherry sheets. The balance is made up of other funding sources, the assessments to the town, and any other third-party resources you can get, which is one of the reasons why, you know, the point that I think I want to make is we as a community can only bear, you know, so much, and it's somewhat disappointing periodically to hear about these other state resources that are going out, think that we'll be benefited by it, and then to have a conversation with the superintendent and realize, yeah, maybe $4,000, you know, on a $20 million budget, that doesn't have much of an impact. So that's, from my perspective, that's one of the things that does concern me. But I just wanted to share those numbers so everybody had a good comparison.
Yeah, and I mean, I would agree that there's a systemic issue with this. No, but I mean, any increase to our budget is going to come from the communities because we've been so flat with the Chapter 70 for so long. So, I mean, in reality, it's in order for us to increase a couple percent in our $20 million budget, that means our communities are increasing 6-7% to try to make up that difference.
And I think just also, again, for numbers for comparison purposes. So the district gets about 9.2 million from Chapter 70. So we look back, okay, what is so as Aaron just said, then the shift comes back to towns, to communities that support the district. Okay, what does the town of Adams receive from the state for state aid? So we received a couple of categories, but you can generalize this as unrestricted general government aid. This year's for the town of Adams is about $2.8 million and less charges of $46,000. So, you know, do that math. And that's not much of an increase over last year, which was 2.7, give or take. So there's not even a lot of wiggle room that we get. And again, this is a proposed budget, first step of at least 3 to 4 other, you know, steps. You have a conference committee step, you have the Senate, you have the House. So these are, again, very preliminary numbers, but I think it's important that we break down and show what the district is getting, what the municipality is getting, and what that impact has on the municipality when there's an ask from the district. It'd be great if, you know, in the House budget or the Senate budget, you know, we'd get double everything. That'd be great, but the likelihood of that is probably not.
You know, the unfortunate thing about the timing is our budget's got to be approved by the school committee before the next, wave of numbers comes out. So this is what we have to work with. Unless the school committee votes, we get significantly different numbers and we, go back. But the process has always been to really not so much rely, but use the first, H1 numbers as our starting point. So,
Yeah, and budget conservatively based on those.
right.
Yes, and again, that goes back to my earlier point, which is all of this is estimate. All of
Yep.
this is, what we think, and being conservative is the safest, course. We do that on the town side in terms of estimating our receipts, and, we're gonna use this figure because you have to have a placeholder. If you folks recall our conversation last year about why were we able to move forward with a town meeting in September, we were able to do that because we finally got a pretty confident word from our legislative delegation. Use this unrestricted general government aid number to build your budget around. So just as a reminder, we're dealing with estimated numbers, but they need to be a placeholder. We need to have a conversation. So any questions for Aaron or Erica up to this point?
Through the chair, I do have a couple
I
questions.
don't chair this meeting.
You're not sure. Okay, you can have this. So Jay, you mentioned a few minutes ago that to the cherry sheets that the district receives an amount from the state, then they give back money. You didn't explain the give back exactly.
Sure.
And it may be to the school district officials, but is that because of the charter school? Is that the reason to give, what is that?
I'll list off the categories, but I'll let,
In front of me.
okay, go ahead, Erica. You do, these are your numbers, so don't let me step in.
It is largely the charter school, of the 1,880,000 that we are assessed. 1.1 million is going towards the charter school, 767,000 is for school choice, which is our current school choice number, so that's obviously subject to change, but again, this is what they use as an estimate. And then $12,000 is used, or is representing our special education assessment, which is funding used to educate those who are incarcerated or out of our, part of our purview of educating in-house.
So that's your outgoing school choice number.
Correct.
Right? And it's your outgoing charter school number. You
Correct.
receive funding for the charter school, but it gets less and less.
Exactly, yeah, our charter school reimbursement at this point has increased, I would say significantly due to the Student Opportunity Act, which again, I wouldn't be relying on very heavily. So we are budgeting conservatively because that number never seems to come to fruition. Last year, they projected us receiving 63,000. FY22, they're projecting 164,000. Again, not a number that I would go with, but it does not, come close to the dollar amount that we are paying out for charter. So it really is wiped away quite quickly.
Erica, what was your actual on reimbursement for fiscal 21? Because the cherry sheet shows 63.2.
Our actual reimbursement was about 86,000.
So they gave you even more than what?
There
They
was more
estimated.
than the estimate, which is
But then when they came out with this number last year, it was initially 120,000.
exactly the
And then they
number.
dropped it in the second round of the cherry
Yeah.
sheets.
The number initially was much, much, much higher. But then when the Student Opportunity Act got wiped away due to everything else happening in the world, it dropped probably more than in half. Which is again why I don't rely on $100,000 increase in that particular one.
What did you use this year for that?
110 is budgeted right now. Which is even with what we budgeted last year, but didn't end up getting, so. I would be hesitant to increase that number to a point where it's reducing aid from other areas.
You kind of have to split the difference with that number. 50 either way. I mean, you get 50,000 less than we're scrambling somewhere in our budget.
Yeah.
So when you get to that bottom chapter 70 number of what's estimated of 9.2 million, you're not even using that then, right? You're using a lesser number than that.
Correct.
It's very seldom does it come out more.
Right. Be nice if it did, but
And just a change of subject, in fact, just for information, the minimum local aid contribution is, we pay a lot more than the minimum local aid contribution, as a Cheshire, as we have always done, as we should do. Right? So that may change because the number of students have changed, but we do pay, that's a number that's the minimum required that we have to pay, right?
And that's the statutory.
And the minimum local is heavily reliant on your towns, like we say, the town's ability to pay.
Right.
And because you were paying over minimum, there was this plan to shift towns that were paying more down, which is what's starting to happen. So they're reducing your minimum local because you not only met it, you were exceeding it in the past. And so consequently, though, it shifts the way the other part of foundation is distributed between the two towns. So it helps, but it hurts at the same time.
I think the majority of the communities in the state do pay above.
Yes,
contribution.
yes.
So, okay, that's still the case. The, another area is chapter 70, and what's the percentage of your budget now of that is chapter 70?
I will tell you right now. It was over 50%.
Say 52.
Yeah, I just looked at the chart today.
Yeah, 52 is.
Yeah,
That's always been the issue too, because half your budget, it used to be a lot more in this past, but 52% of your budget, the only increase you get is 30,000.
Exactly.
So that's where a major problem that our district has had. And, but then you look at how is chapter 70 determined by, a lot of it's determined by the number of students that you have. But we've been held harmless, which is a good thing. Or we've been very fortunate that we've been held harmless, correct? Because the reason I think that we get very little on top of our chapter 70 is because our enrollment has continuously gone down over the last 10 years. And if they went by that and didn't hold us harmless, we would be way down in funding in regards to chapter 70. So I think we're fortunate in one way that we're held harmless, but we only get 30,000 on top of half, 50% of your budget plus. So that's an issue. Another question, how many students, I'm sorry, but I don't want to take.
well, you're fine.
I'm on a roll.
You're on a roll.
roll, John, roll.
Oh, it's a discussion. Don't be quiet.
Yeah, just-
Keep
just-
going.
No, please, I like questions.
I'm just gonna- But that's why they're here.
So the enrollment, so now you look at it, with the county, yes, the state, because of our enrollment, the state's not giving us, they're giving us very little on top of the chapter 70 funding. And so, so the last several years, the towns have had to pick up what the state has not provided as they used to when the enrollment was pretty much steady 10 plus years ago, maybe more than that. So what is the current enrollment? Was the October 1st report? What is the current enrollment in the district?
I have it.
Yep.
It was 1,057,
1,057.
and that includes our school choice in kids.
School choice. Okay, so you got 1,057?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So, if we go back 10 years, this is a question that I just need to discuss. So I'm educated on it, but also individuals throughout this whole process may ask similar questions. So we can all be educated and respond to it as we go through this. So when I left about 10 years ago, it was going down back then. The number of students already started. back then, and it was only about 16 to 1700 at the time. So, chapter 70 hasn't gone up, but the school enrollment has reduced. I'm just showing out, these are just, not even estimates, are just a number. Let's say it's been 600 students less over 10 years that it's been reduced. The chapter 70 has been held harmless with a little bit of an addition to it. And the town has provided average of 3%, I would say, the
Yes.
last 10 years. So we've continued to keep contributing around 3%. And chapter 70 hasn't gone down, but the number of students has gone down, I'll say 600, just for discussion. And hopefully the minutes reflect that.
That's
So,
450 is the actual.
was it 450?
Yeah.
Oh. So in 10 years, it's been 450 students? Right. So as we continue to contribute, but the amount of students has gone down 450. Now, years ago, we used to say, we used to explain to the selectmen and the finance committee, but you can't, if you take a student out of this class and you take a student out of this class, and I said it myself,
Yeah.
you can't get rid of a teacher, right? Because you only taken, for each grade, you have 12 grades, you have 12 students, you can't eliminate a teacher, you lost 12 students. But if you lose 450 over 10 years, then the question becomes, in reduction in staff, because you have less students, right? Taking into consideration, we always operated with less staff than we needed for the students we had. So that's a question that I just need to get a good understanding is that, yes, I understand how the number is created, that you come forward with. I got that. I understand the situation you're in because of chapter 70 and, only goes up just half your budget, over 2%, goes on minimum. I got that. But the factor to look at is the only thing you can look at, in my opinion, and the charter school doesn't help, and they've hurt us big time. And we tried to get that fixed years ago with the legislation, and it didn't go. What about the reduction of 450 students over 10 years? How we've had that reduction, and why the budget continues to increase every single year with reduction of 450 kids. So that's a question that will be brought up, and I just need to understand that. I do understand a lot of the reasoning for all this, but I just wanted to provide some explanation to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first and foremost, you did have a reset about 4 years ago. With the closure of Cheshire Elementary School, we're still working through and recovering. And I think at that time, there was extra money, not to say that there was extra money, but there was probably money appropriate for what was really needed to move the district forward. So the district was also going into what they call turnaround status with the state. So they added some key positions, we're able to lower class sizes, we're able to get instructional coaches in the doors and really get some help to start turning things around and really also look at adding programming to attract students to remain in the district, like Project Lead the Way and some of those pieces. So that money was reinvested in a lot of ways over time. I think the other part of that in terms of the budget is you have special education needs. And when you look at our numbers in terms of special education numbers, you have better than a quarter of our student population on individual education plans and receiving services. Those are expensive services. Those are statutory services. And those are services that once we have an amount, we can never spend lower than that amount. We have to continue to spend more by a lot. So I think those expenses have continued to spiral, but that's also because we have students with needs and we have to provide those services. Past couple of years, now I have a new director of student services. We've been kind of looking at programming and looking at, in particular, the students that have been outplaced. Because when you look at our outplacements, those students can cost us $100,000, $200,000 per student. And anybody that lives in our community that has those needs to be placed in a facility, our district is responsible for it, even if they went to another district and then had that need happen, we end up flipping the bill. So you're looking at $400,000 to $500,000 in tuition to these places every year. We've kind of looked at getting some programming to address some of those needs and try to handle some of those pieces in-house. But I mean, the reality is the special education cost and just really the cost around getting appropriate staffing have continued to drive it up. And like everybody else, you have your fixed costs that continue to go up that you can't control. I mean, your utilities and things like that. Transportation goes up, past couple of years, it's been 2.5%, but we're going to be renegotiating a contract on that. So that, I mean, those costs go up. I mean, nothing seems to ever go down. We've been lucky enough that the insurance has stabilized the past couple of years, and we've been at least flat with that, because we would be in a real jam if we had to deal with insurance increases at this point in time. So, and then unfortunately, coming in the door, my first job had to be to right size some of this stuff. I had to eliminate 22 positions in the budget last year to kind of get us to a point in time where I thought we were sustainable in getting to right size. So, I mean, those obviously are hard decisions we have to make, but the reality is we've reached a threshold right now where, as John was stating, like elementary classes average between 18 and 22 students, middle school classes between 22 and 26 students. We can't go any higher than that because we can't deliver instruction effectively if we have higher class sizes than that. Then you have your tier 2 interventions, the students that you're trying to prevent from needing the special education services. We have to develop those programs, and we have to have people to deliver those programs. Otherwise, you're going to end up with special ed numbers that continue to go up, can continue to drive your costs up exponentially. And then you look at programming again, the high school, well, actually district-wide, we've added Project Lead the Way, and there was a significant investment. And that's a program that really, I think, is something we can continue to build and be proud of. And we have to look at the high school pathways. And, when you look at the high school level, you're also talking about, we have core courses that we have to offer, whether there's 5 kids in them or 15 kids in them. You can't teach biology with chemistry in the same room. So you have sets of course offerings that you have to offer no matter what your numbers are. So, I think there are a lot of those factors that really go into why the budget can't continue to go down and have us provide what we're supposed to provide.
I think that just an add to that too is specifically this year, but will probably be becoming something that we'll see continue as the use of technology. We've had to utilize so many different platforms of online learning and software. And I don't know that that's going to go away. I think it's probably beneficial to maintain that. But like you said earlier, we did, have purchased so much technology in terms of machines for students and staff this year. We're going to have to continue to budget to maintain those and replace those, which was something we always wanted to do, but now we know that with that comes a maintenance plan, and that is an add, particularly at this point to this budget, because there's so much new that we need to continue on with in the coming years that wasn't there before.
Yeah, so for example, our fleet of Chromebooks for students, the grant money was great because it got us to a one-to-one device. So every student can have a device in the building moving forward. But those devices last 6 years, so you have to have a 6-year replacement plan of 200 devices per year. So we have to kind of start that piece. We purchased 800 devices through the grant funding, and we've already started that replacement cycle. Another piece that we're dealing with is the technology that was purchased for the high school in 2012 is still the technology that's in the teacher's hands today. So we have those devices that are breaking down, need to be replaced, and even hardware in terms of delivering instruction, document cameras, projectors, all of those pieces. We have to continue update and start maintaining those pieces. So, you know, a lot of those things are coming due, and we want to have a plan that's part of every budget, so we don't get to the end of 5 years and go, we need $500,000. Where are we going to get it? So we're trying to plan ahead as part of this process too.
And thank you for that response. And, you know, and I'm going to give you the tough questions. The response. So there's my last question. In regards to today, with 1,057 students, and you know, considering that special needs, yes, that can happen any time of the year, send a student to a specific school. But as a district at a point now where you have the staff that you feel is required to maintain the educational level that your plan moving forward calls for. And I know it's never enough, right? But you're pretty much where you think you need to be with the staff over the years by, you did add specific staff that was called out in studies, things like that, which were required. So are you at a point now that you have sufficient staff?
That's a little bit of a loaded question, I think. I mean, I think we're at a threshold right now where we can't go any lower than what we've had. I do think there are areas, and I think the grant is going to allow us to do a couple of things the next few years to backfill some things like reading specialists and other needs. I do think, you know, in terms of long term, there's probably a need for more specialists in the district. We've been trying to work on. So, you know, at this point in time, can we get by? Yes. Would we like a little bit more in certain areas? Yes, but no, those are the sacrifices you make when you're trying to work, you know, work the budget numbers. You know, we're really taking an approach now, looking at impact on kids and getting more data behind our decisions in terms of where we're placing these resources and the work that we're doing, and getting instructional focuses for students and understanding, you know, if we have a deficit here, this is what we should be doing for the student, instead of putting students in a room that are behind and saying, well, we're going to give you all the same thing and hope for the best. So we're learning to target our intervention and our services much more than we have in the past. Although I can't speak too much about the past.
Okay, Harry, thank you. So.
I'll see if Mr. Burdick has any questions on the finance side. Now everything is still kind of preliminary.
No, pretty good, thank you.
I'm curious if you know this number off the top of your head, but wondering what the cost per student is to educate students in the district. And you don't have to answer tonight if you don't know that number, but.
That's another loaded question.
I know.
It really depends on the kid. I mean, there's a kid that can cost me $120,000. There's a kid, you know, can cost me $10,000.
What Crystal cost?
Oh, she was cheap. She had it back then.
Get used to it, Crystal. This is gonna happen all the time.
Anyway, probably a bad joke, sorry. So anyway, if you look on the DESI site, our number would be in the ballpark of $15,000 per student. And if you look at that statewide, we're probably the lower third. I think, you know, every discussion I have in terms of the district around negotiating salaries or whatever, it's always we're in the lower third. You know, we work our way up a little higher and then we fall back.
That's great.
Excuse me?
Do you have anything?
Well, I don't have a specific question. I do, we're all here talking. I do appreciate being invited to this meeting. I don't have much to add, but I know that we are working towards a pretty tight schedule. And with numbers being in the percentages that they are, I think getting as many people in the room as we can and understanding, what's behind the numbers is very important. So I appreciate being here today, and know we need to work with everyone the next couple of weeks, if not longer, to work through the process.
So I think the only information not yet is Erica and Aaron on this point is a good point. There's been no questions beyond exactly what goes into these numbers. I think the last piece is your presentation in terms of what the potential assessments are to the town for fiscal 22.
Sure. So we've got our 3 scenarios here. Obviously, like we said, scenario 1 is what we were hoping you wish for. This budget has an increase of 403,000 on our side, 2.01% increase, and in turn pushes 382,000 to the town of Adams, which is a 7.22% increase. This is our budget, and including what we consider our core, we are utilizing our ESSER grants for 311,500 of either one-time expenditures or expenditures that in year 2 will be able to phase into the operating budget due to attrition or consolidation, things like that. We want to be using our ESSER money thoughtfully, not for costs that we know will continue for years to come, but using a one-time source of money for them. So we're trying to be thoughtful in that respect.
And ESSER, Erica, is?
Don't ask me to
I don't know what the
cite
acronym
the
is.
acronym, but it was basically supplemental funds due to kind of like stimulus,
Yeah, I mean,
stimulus for the schools.
it came to us through Title I.
Yeah. So money was distributed to schools based on their Title I allocations, percentage wise.
Elementary and secondary school emergency relief.
There you go. Another source
Thank
of
you.
relief funding, but it's not Google. It's not strictly tied to COVID or anything like the CARES Act money or anything like that. But it's funds we got this year, and then funds we're also getting as of July 1, and it runs for 2 years. So we have 2 years to expend our amount in full. So we're trying to thoughtfully use that over the course of the next 2 years. Scenario 2 is pushing more of our core budget into the ESSER grant, reducing our budget by about 160,000, which equates to a 1.21% increase. For the town, that equates to a 4.91% increase. Scenario 3 is pushing 160 from scenario 2 into ESSER, and then an additional cut of 115,000, which brings our budget up 0.64% or $128,000, and results in an increase to the town of 3.24% or $171,888. So this is, again, very preliminary. We had to have these conversations in order to be confident with the numbers we move forward with over the course of the next couple of weeks, understanding the limitations that we're all facing. So this was kind of where we are, where we might have to be, hoping somewhere in the middle might be attainable, but it was important for you to know where we're at, and we obviously know what the allocation has been in terms of percentage increases over the years. So anticipating that, we wanted to at least illustrate what we're looking at on our end.
Yeah, I mean, scenario 2 allows us still to utilize the funding for some of its intent. We're gonna likely need to provide more mental health services, academic support, to really fill in for what quite frankly was a lost year with the pandemic. We're coming up on a year on it, and everybody did the best they could, but the reality is we have some work, some additional work to do to get us up to snuff. So if we end up with scenario 3, it ends up being you know, we're surviving another year as the district. We're not necessarily moving anything forward. So that, I mean, that's why we need to have this discussion to see, you know, what we can do and, you know, and how far we can come in terms of the numbers, I guess.
So I've translated those into dollars and cents for a little bit more being able for a contextual basis. So, for example, in fiscal year 21, Hoosick Valley Regional School District portion of Adams' budget was $5,298,432. That translated to 32.4% of the Adams municipal budget. So that number is what is based on in terms of these percentage increases that the school district presented. So starting from the top, if the select board and finance committee were to accept scenario number 1, that would be a 7.22% increase over fiscal year 21, resulting in a commitment by the town of $5,680,850. Scenario number 2 would increase by 4.91%. That would be $5,580,483. Scenario 3, a 3.24% increase would result in a $5,470,320 assessment to the town of Adams. We've averaged, last year we averaged a little over, I believe, John, if you can recall, I think it was a little over 3%. We did last year, it was like 3, was it 3 point?
It was.
Like 3 point.
We've averaged, I believe in the town and people in this room.
3.069.
3.069. You know, people in this room have been around a lot longer than I do. As John said earlier, we've averaged about 3%, you know, every year. So for example, fiscal year 11, you're at 3.9 million, and fiscal year 21, 10 years later, we're at 5.29 million. Our total budget for fiscal 21 was 16,348,818, just to put things into perspective. We've computed today, is at the end of the day, a lot of people wonder what the impact is in the budget. We've computed today, assuming that we would stick around with that 3% number. So we've never, other than last year, I don't think we've gone more than a 3% increase. But we computed a 3.24% increase at 5,470,000, 320. We've built all of our numbers that we have around. And if our budget holds at this time, our first pass budget through, if we hold with our percent increase and decreases that we've had, that assessment would be that number, 5,470,320, and we've held our estimated shifted residential tax rate to 22.99 at this time. And remember, I want to make it very clear that is estimated at this time. So I can't compute it because I'm not a human Mary who could probably do this in her head. We'll get Crystal up to speed at some point. But, we could show if we were to, the finance committee and select board at a, one of their other meetings does accept one of those other scenarios, there would be a bottom line increase on that. So just for the municipal side, that's the relevant impact that we have at this time. We've tried to have information tonight to show what our costs are on the municipal side as of right now, to be able to show what that impact is on the school side. This also includes the McCann number. As Crystal and I and Mary were chatting earlier, everybody should understand too, and Aaron, you sat on that board, the formula system that McCann uses spread out over more communities has a lesser impact on us as a community. So like, for example, McCann's asking this year for $1,055,418, and that's already been programmed in. So I just want everybody to know what numbers we're using in the budget to compute that final number. That's about all the data that I think I have present. John, I don't know if you wanted me to go over some of the numbers that we had talked about, the additional numbers just for full context in terms of the override that we're still, paying for the school building project. We've had some additional capital. I know Mike and I have talked about it, up there elementary. So even though we're talking tonight about what our assessment is, Town of Adams has invested separately into the school district at other times as well. The final tax rate number does include the override, the debt exclusion override, which is now down to about 620,000 for this year. Crystal, do you know what year that comes off? Do you have the debt schedule in front of you?
Ours, for the school,
Yes.
33, 2033, I believe. This one is,
It was 20-year.
Yeah, I don't have it on my,
Yeah, I can.
okay, so it's probably 33, Eric. Okay. And of course, that goes down every year.
it's slowly starting to go down. Really slowly.
Got a question in regards to this year's transportation. We vote on the foundation budget, but we also vote on the transportation. Do you have an initial draft impact of transportation this year?
Yes, I do. I don't think I have it in front of me, but the 2.5%. You're asking me for the one thing I don't have in front of me.
Oh, stop there, John.
Hold on,
It was on the latest trend sheet.
it looks like our transportation budget in total is going up about 27,000. something. Yes. Last year was 972,983. This year we have budgeted 995,188. And of that, we are offsetting 400,000 with transportation reimbursement as well as additional funds that we have in our revolving fund that we're also using to offset the assessment to the towns for transportation.
And what's the percentage of that state reimbursement?
Last year was 76%, which I believe was the highest it's been in a long time. But again, that 76% reimbursement is only on eligible expenditures, which are only for transportation costs for regular ed students living beyond 1.5 miles. So we don't get reimbursement on that full amount. And due to COVID, they don't consider payments to bus companies while in remote, just as part of our agreement as eligible expenditures. So the amount that is going to be eligible for reimbursement in our end of year report this year will be less as it was last year due to being remote, but still paying for transportation costs. If that makes sense.
It does. It should, the state, as we all know, promises 100%. We became a regional district, so.
Yeah, I've never gotten it.
Never get.
I got there once when the governor was, who's the governor from Williamstown? 1 year we had 100%, that was it. It used to be 80 at the moment, now it's 76.
Yeah, it had historically hovered around 72, 73. I think last year was the highest it's done in a bit.
Yeah, and I said the last one. How much, do you have an estimate of how much Emd funding you're using to build this budget?
Same as last year, 300,000.
300,000?
Yeah.
What is so where will that leave you estimated for Emd?
That'll leave us, well, this is very preliminary in terms of projections, because who knows what can happen in the next few months. We're hovering around, I think, the 3.5% mark, which would be about 680,000, similar to last year.
Okay, that's well below the recommended or the
Below the 5%.
Yeah, they recommend 5%.
5%, correct? Okay, I appreciate your responses, because next time we meet might be the official meeting and with the opportunity. So I thank you for your responses.
I just thank you guys for coming in, and it's part of the collaborative nature that the town of Adams has had with the school district. You know, when Aaron and Erica started talking to Jay and Mary about, you know, several scenarios that you're looking at while you're putting your budget together, Jay thought it would be helpful for all of us to just kind of be in the room and talk about those scenarios. You know, we talked a little bit about Northern Berkshire Vocational Regional School Districts, and they came through as just the one scenario, right? And we're looking to have a full conversation about all of the variables when putting their budget together. So I thought it would be helpful, again, as we're starting this process, and you guys have just a couple weeks left before you have your public hearing. I think it's also eye-opening about how our regional school district is funded. And that formula obviously needs some work, so that we can be, we could be spending the kind of money that we need to be spending on the students in our district to help them succeed going forward. So I think this just helps shed even more light on kind of where we want. It's just some of my thoughts in this evening. Hopefully give you guys a little bit more of a path as you're still talking, when you're putting the budgets together, and you're still fine tuning what you'll be presenting to the budget or to the Board of Selectmen and to the Finance Committee, which will be coming up, and that'll be a really nice introduction to municipal finance for Crystal. You've been working with the town for the last 2 years, so you've had a good foundation in municipal government, but this will be quite a whirlwind for you. But that's okay. Jay has survived 2 years. He came in as town administrator right in the heart of budget season. We like to do that to the employees who have to be responsible for the budget. So this is perfect time.
Then budget year 2 was COVID, which was month to month. I mean, strange municipal finance, you know, procedure. We were taking it one day at a time. It was changing fast. So I actually long for that. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so pleased to be in February, actually being able to have this conversation. I thank Mary, I thank the department heads, although some I had to prod like a father to get them to give us their numbers so that we could begin to actually have a practical conversation about this and not feel rushed, not feel there's not information being presented. It's not always easily understood. It's, you know, if you don't do it every day, if you're not in it, it's not anything that's intuitive. So I think I always learn from these experiences, and I do it almost every day, but really we're not talking, you know, we should always have probably a conversation about the school district funding. You know, it's very hard as a town administrator, and you know, probably as members of the board feel this way too, is we have this obligation to fund the district, but we're not in it alone. There's another community that's involved, and it's not like a school department where the executive office or the administrative office has more, you know, it's about giving us information so we can make an educated decision. It's not an easy relationship to have. So just being able to sit across like this and understand where these numbers are coming from, I know is helpful to me.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's a short-term component of this, you know, where we have some very pressing needs that we need to make sure we meet, you know, for the impact on kids. There are also long-term discussions we have to have about what's going to happen with this formula, because this is not a sustainable path for us or you, you know, in terms of that discussion, or us or the communities in general, when you have to continually be the main mechanism for any potential increase in the budget, because it's not coming from the state level.
It's important to have this conversation. Hoosick Valley is the number one portion of the town of Adams budget, followed, I think, by McCann after that, followed by the police department, I believe, and then probably followed by Public Works. I would say those are our top four that take up the majority of the of the budget. So it's important to have these conversations.
I think it's important that folks know that there is an awful lot of thought that goes into building this budget. It starts very early on in December, you know, and then we're really looking at impact of our dollars on kids. If it's not impacting kids, then we're going to shift the resources to where we're seeing the impact.
In terms of timing, we have a public hearing on March 8th, which will put you on the path of finalizing your numbers.
Yeah, the 29th is our final
That's it.
vote. In between now and then, we have an audit and evaluation committee meeting, which we will be reviewing scenarios, various scenarios we discussed tonight.
So between now and March 8th, we'll have an audit and evaluation.
Yep, subcommittee meetings and meetings, votes, more meetings.
You sound like me.
And that's where we'll be looking for direction from the committee, essentially.
On the 8th, do we need clear direction, or can there still be a potential scenario?
We can- Yeah, I mean, the whole point of the hearing is to look at the budget and pull it apart and ask any questions and make any recommendations in terms of what we're going to edit or change, revise.
So residents, finance committee members, board of selectmen, we can all participate in that and hear that discussion. Is it a public hearing, so there is an opportunity for public to ask questions? Yeah,
Yes.
okay. And all be handled via Zoom and.
Yeah, the whole Zoom thing.
I have to say, it's actually nice to be in a room right now with everybody.
So much easier to have dialogue.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think with the lifting of the restrictions, we'll at least get the committee for the presentation that way. And I know everybody can see it.
Well, last Thursday, we were in the yellow. I haven't gotten any data midweek. We normally don't get any data, so we really won't know until late Thursday where we are. And it's always hard to tell, you know, how that data jumps. And even if it's just one more number puts you in the red, and then you have to, even though it's just one number, one positive case above yellow, and you go in the red, it's draconian steps that you have to take, even though it may be by one. But
We know that very well.
yeah, this is, you know, it's empirical based, it's driven at the Department of Public Health level. The only thing we do at the municipal level is check to make sure that our first responders are aware of any addresses that might be COVID positive, so they can don their PPE as they respond to an address. Other than that, we essentially, you know, the Board of Health has a rough idea of what the numbers are, but the DPH numbers control what we do.
Right, and that's the same with us, it's then the DPH numbers driving our work, and we, you know, we're looking for information and collecting information on how it's impacting the school level. We have staff cases, we're reporting that to DESE. If we have student cases, we're also reporting that to DESE and maintaining an idea of what we have for quarantines. And, you know, so that's why a couple of times, even when we initially hit the red, we were so impacted by the numbers that we had to move to remote. And right now we're having discussions about this very scenario you talked about of, well, if we're one across the threshold, but still safe to be in school. Let's have a discussion about this.
Well, I was unable to get on the call this week, Aaron, that usually involves the Lieutenant Governor.
Yep.
And there's usually a representative from DOE, you know, on there. But I read the article about we anticipate, or the governor has ordered schools to be back in session by April 1st.
Yes, I mean, that's, well, elementary schools are saying, and basically right now, the commissioner has asked, he's gonna ask the board for the ability to make recommendations for us to open elementaries in the beginning of April and middle school and high school at a later date. I don't really know how that's gonna play out. I think statutorily, they're going to say these hours don't count, you gotta figure it out. So, you know, we've already kind of started planning where we were hoping, you know, as things opened up in April, we could do more, and now it looks like we're gonna do more quicker. So it's gonna be an interesting couple of months. Because we still have, the recommendations from the CDC of 6 feet spacing. So, and if we maintain that, then we can't fit. Even at the 3 feet spacing, we're close borders, we're close in numbers in some places. So, it's gonna be back to surveys and feasibility studies and everything we did to prepare last summer, except we only have a couple of weeks to do. In the middle of budget season.
Just a few things. Full disclosure, I think this is the first time I've been in the same room with you since before Thanksgiving. Since the Board of Selectmen has been meeting fully remote, given the numbers for our community. So it's kind of nice to be back. So, all right, so your final vote, back to just timing for me, everybody in this room knows that I like to look at things on a calendar and I like to start planning, and I drive all of you insane with that part of my brain. I'm thinking, Jay, that we probably don't want to start budget meetings and discussions with Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen until maybe after you've finalized your number. Is that?
Well, they're gonna need a hard number at some point.
Okay.
So I think the budget subcommittee is gonna have to meet, and give me a recommendation.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly. Last year was so, I don't remember the
Nothing,
exact.
nothing was the way it normally was, so.
Right, and then I walked in my year before, everything was already done. So I just presented. So you guys have to kind of help walk me through what.
Yeah, because we've typically given guidance on where we'd like to see the tax rate, or at least no more than, kind of guidance. With this isn't, we don't make decisions, we can recommend things to the full Board of Selectmen. And so if a vote on which scenario makes sense, then we have an even shorter window of time to get some stuff done.
I believe this year we should get back to going through each section of the budget, represent through Zoom.
Yeah.
The representation from, each area, your staff. And also the schools, we had, was it 2 years ago, they called in superintendents. We gotta get back to that process again. Last year, I don't think we did it.
We did.
We did,
Oh,
we did it twice.
So last year, okay.
Yeah.
I've been looking for both for a year, so I don't know.
It feels about 3 years.
John's
ago.
calendar hasn't changed.
I was like, we did that process in April, May, and
Yeah,
then we did it again in
We,
August.
we're trying to stay on a normal course. Assuming we might be able to have a town meeting on the normal pattern in June. And then we just weren't getting the state and local aid numbers, which are, that's a decent percentage of our budget. So that's when we stopped, we went as far as we could in the process, assuming we might have numbers. And then that's when we had to make a decision to go month to month. And then we had to go back one more time before town meeting as we got the warrant ready to go. And we got all of our financial articles in place, then we had to have one more time through because we did make some adjustments to the budget that had been approved up to that point. So it all makes linear sense when you think it through, but it was looking back, it was a lot. So again, having this conversation now at this point is pretty good.
And Christine, you also have to account for the finance committee's time. I think last year we were kind of crushed time.
We did a joint.
Yeah, we did.
a joint one last year.
We did.
Yeah.
And then it was just crunched there at the end to finalize everything for town meeting. I think
Right.
it was just like a couple of days window.
Yeah,
when we were
4
going
days to get it all in.
Yeah, and we were trying to go with a June date and for posting and all of that, but I think things. No, it's a little tight still again in August and September.
August was even tighter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little foggy, so I just know we did it twice.
I have to sit through, as you saw, Mary actually Crystal and Mary had been working on the budget. We got all of our data that we wanted from our departments. We got our last couple of insurance numbers, a couple of our fixed costs that we were waiting on. And there was a few preliminary numbers that we had early. And then we got those final numbers today, which helped us as well build our budget. I don't think, I need to go through this now with my eyes, take a look at our departments, see if there was anything in there that I told everyone the level fund would reduce automatically. Some of our departments did, they were able to come in. Again, this is very preliminary, but you know, our personnel services this year, as of this point, are estimated only to go up 1.87%. And we're going to come to the board with a reduction in operating expenses this year by 0.31%. So it's as always, it's not lean in a negative way. It's not tight in a negative way. It's a good snapshot of what it takes us to run the town. And we're not adding people. We're not adding a lot of money to different departments. So we've got to take a look at this, go through it. And I don't think it'll be long before I say to the budget subcommittee, we're ready to go and look through these numbers before a full. You know, I might be able to tell you by the end of tomorrow, hey, we're ready to go. I feel good with this. I wanted to call, Bob Rumble over wastewater and just check like a couple of oddball things. But other than that, I think that's pretty much what we got.
Okay.
Capital is not in yet. We had a preliminary conversation with Department of Revenue today about what our free cash number is. For everyone who knows, we do put our annual CIP plan together based on what our available free cash number is. We've anticipated right out of the gate a lower free cash number this year simply because of the reflection of the economy. Wasn't overly thrilled with the number that we have, but we'll wait until they send us the documentation to look at it. And then we can have the conversation about the capital side. But capital side does not affect the tax rate.
So more to come on our schedule.
Yeah, we're on track, on path. We'll try to keep it that way.
We'll be talking to him. Figure out schedule and timing and all of that good stuff. And in the meantime, team here will start pulling together all the budget information. And we'll figure out the logistics of meetings as well.
Right. Depends on what color we are, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and if we can find a location and, yeah, maybe if the weather breaks, we can sit outside. Not that too much. It was beautiful today. I would have sat outside for a meeting.
Sun was nice, yeah.
Anyway, okay. John, anything for announcements or go to the order?
Also,
Okay, I don't have anything either, so except for to just thank everybody again. I appreciate you accepting our invitation to come and talk to us.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Kind of let us know where things land, so
Sure.
just accordingly.
So that takes us to an adjournment of 6:24 PM. Ashley, thank you very much for signing in and taking minutes tonight. We appreciate that work too.
Thanks, Ashley.
No problem.
All right, have a good night.